PGA Nation, we are back. And I have good news for you this week. The good news is Scotty Scheffler can't win again because he's not playing. So someone else has got to win, which is exciting because it was looking like maybe no one else was going to win again. It might just be Scotty every single week as well as he's playing. It has been impressive. Scotty is on an absolute tear, but still a fun field this week with the Valspar Championship. I'm looking forward to breaking it down with you fellas tonight. Spence, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Joel. You know, it is nice that Scotty Scheffler is not in this field, as you mentioned. I know David and I both had Brian Harman last week, so it was very close, but no cigar sort of a finish there. I don't know. Like, it was kind of everybody else's tournament to win other than Scotty Scheffler. And Scheffler was the only one that put the pieces together on Sunday. Not that he was perfect. He missed some short putts himself, but Harman started badly. Xander couldn't close the tournament. Wyndham Clark came on very strong at the end after being hit and miss throughout the entire day. But I think it's a unique DFS board that we have this week, just with, once again, we're down to the $5,000 pay scale. That's a very interesting thing because there's not very many $7,000 players that are in play for this tournament, but excited to be back. And it was a profitable player, so can never complain about that.
You're right. I think it's really interesting about how they're going about this season because it's so unique and it's less of the guys that are normally playing. How they're doing pricing is different. I'm a little surprised there's a $5,000 range this week considering there's no Scotty or anything. I figure, the $5,000 range works when you're playing Rory and Scotty and they're priced up at $12K.
Oh, no.
Here we go. The first WD of the PGA Draftcast has come nice and early, 3 minutes into the broadcast, and Joel was already withdrawn from the tournament. Speaking of WDs, my DFS team on the PGA Draftcast was hamstrung because I unfortunately had the WD last week, which was Tom Kim, who was, I think, decent value, under-owned, and then pulled up with supposed illness after just 8 holes, which is always really disappointing when a golfer decides to start a tournament, plays 8 holes, and then withdraws, because that obviously has a ton of repercussions, not just for DFS, but also for golf betting markets. As Spence mentioned, awesome week for us over at Win Daily Sports. We both had Brian Harman. I had Hideki Matsuyama as well within my selections. He finished 6th, selected at 35-1. And here's the thing with golf betting, right? Like, you could have taken Scotty Scheffler as the winner in the Players' Championship. He was obviously going to be decent enough value. He was a fair price in my markets at 6-1 or thereabouts to win the tournament. But when you're looking at golf betting, value is really key. And Brian Harman in second with his top 5 finish got a full place at $17. Hideki Matsuyama finishing 6th got us a full place at plus 800. So there's different ways to climb to the top of the mountain, as it were. And both of those ended up actually being more profitable plays for us than taking Scotty Scheffler for the win. In terms of the matchups, excellent as well. Round 4 matchups, particularly, I went 5 of 6 on the selections there. Just missed out on a huge multi at plus 4,000 for going 6 of 6. Unfortunately, Mark Hubbard did very well in the final round, but going against a very hot putter with Harris English, just missed that one by 2 shots for us. So solid tournament all round at the Players. Make sure you're over at Win Daily. We're delivering this week on, week out. Stephen, of course, the best ownership articles in the business, gave out some really hot showdown plays as well. Went 4 of 4 for cashing in the showdown market. So it's a great time to join. And if you're looking in the description of this video, never been a better time to join. We've got our deep dive deal back again, exclusively in the lead up to the Masters. Won't be here forever, but you're getting 50% off your annual membership. So it's only $249 for an entire year. That's not just golf, that's all sports, and it's the absolute best value that you can get for any sort of premium coverage, from DFS to betting, NBA, NHL, everything that you need, NFL, college football. Am I missing anything, Spence? Pretty much everything.
Win Daily's crushing it with everything over there. So yeah, definitely check it out if you're not already. And I think the Scotty Scheffler answer that you gave. It really just comes down to exposure of how much you actually have to get down to place that wager. Because I agree with you. I thought the going rates were fair, or at least in the range of being fair. You're probably a quarter of a point in one way or another there of what was proper, like anywhere between 5.75 to 1 and like 6.25 to 1, depending on how I ran it, was kind of the proper going rate. It was a very volatile TPC sawgrass course that we were getting last week. But, as you kind of mentioned, David, with the matchup plays that you just discussed, like that's always going to be the bread and butter. It's those matchups. It's the each way bets that we're able to talk about there in the outright market. It's the placement bets that come into play. There's a lot more that goes into the game than just hitting the winner. Hitting the winner will give those really monumentally great weeks, but all those other things also help to increase the bankroll and raise that ROI for the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, could not agree more with that. Hey, before we get into your course analysis, quick question here from Zach Jeffers, which is the same question I asked, which is this the Harlem Globetrotter? I didn't ask if it was a Harlem Globetrotter hat, but I was very intrigued to see what was on the cap this week. Can you describe the outfit for us, Spencer?
Yeah, so I'm in March Madness mode right now. Went to school at UNLV, so that's the Hey Reb mascot there. I have the Jerry Tarkanian shirt on. UNLV basketball is not what it used to be, unfortunately, and there's not a lot on the UNLV front. I mean, we're more of a football school now, shockingly, than we are a basketball school. So gonna rep UNLV anytime I can. It felt like a nice week to wear this, but it's all UNLV gear for me.
Well, I'm in New Zealand, so March Madness means absolutely nothing for me, but I do love to cover golf. I love the PGA Tour, and I love this golf course this week, in particular, the Copperhead course. Spence, can you give us your course breakdown, please?
Yeah, I'll let you talk about the weather, David. That is definitely your wheelhouse there, and I'll just exclude that from the conversation that we're going to have. You can dive into how the weather plays a factor, but I've always found Copperhead to be really interesting from a data outlook because you get these, I want to call them correlated answers at the very top when you look at Sam Burns, Paul Casey going back to back. Like there's that high-end success that comes into play, but really when you look at this predictive nature of course history, it ranks near the bottom on tour for rollover predictability. Maybe that comes down a little bit to the different iterations of this contest that we've gotten over the years. When it plays easy, it gets into that 17 under par sort of range. When it's its most complicated, it can slip into that single digit range. I do think the weather here can play a big factor with the wind. So that's something that you can discuss, David, when we get into that section. There's always present danger that looms here because of the 74 bunkers and then half the holes featuring some semblance of water. There's a lot of talk about this course, and rightfully so, for the tee to green acumen that is needed. I decided to also add putting to the mix. I saw a 4% increase in the expected dispersion of scoring over the projected long-term historical. Nice to be back, Joel.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, over the long-term duration of the stats there. But it's like one of the reasons why over 67% of shots occur from 150 plus yards. This is a very compact off the tee test in general. You have 24-yard wide fairways. This 3-inch thick rough is what we initially saw. I've seen that it's not quite as much. Now, there's been some mixed reports there. I guess let's pay attention to where this rough actually is going to sit over the next 24 hours. But I think sometimes we convolute the handicapping process more than it needs to be. Like one of the most important stats for me this week was just strokes gained total. That's, yes, going to tell you who the good golfers are in the field. And it's a lot more than that when it comes down to any of the recalculations for how I weighed those areas. But this has been a very simplistic process for me over the past few years. Like I had Sam Burns 2 years ago. I had Taylor Moore last year. I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel when things are going well. So it's like, I'm just running the same model every single time. And, it's been a very simple way to build it, but it's proven advantageous doing so. So I'm not going to change something that's working.
Fair enough. And look, I had the winner here last year as well, Taylor Moore. We got him at 70-1 to win the golf tournament. So it was fantastic returns and obviously a really hot week for us at the players as well. So as I said, I mean, we're just giving the product away at the moment with that 50% off discount in the description. So make sure you're jumping on that. Spence, I've got a follow-up question for you from that course breakdown before I give a bit of spiel on the weather. This tournament here last year, right? Par 5 scoring. Yeah. The 4 par 5s were the only holes that played under par for the week. How do you take that statistic? Does that then mean that you weigh par 5 scoring higher? Or do you take the fact that actually the majority of the field's going to be birdieing those holes and needs to birdie those holes, and you actually start to look at things like par 4 scoring, or the par 3s are all over 195 yards, who plays those holes well, where you can really differentiate yourself from the rest of the field?
Yeah, one of the things that I do when I build my model is I always look at the historical returns that we've gotten in par 3, 4, and 5 scoring. So I'll look how the winners have performed on those holes. Taylor Moore dominated the par 5s there. So that's going to be an answer that kind of propels it a little bit in that direction. But I want to run things over a 5-year duration of time to figure out the winners, the top 5, the top 10, people that are missing the cut. Where are the struggles coming into play? When I built my model for this event, I didn't have an abnormal distribution between the 3 ranges. It essentially became like 40% on par 5, 30% on par 4, 30% on par 3 for the importance that I found. There are certain courses where I think that sometimes the par 5 scoring gets heightened and you do have 4 here. But for whatever reason inside of my model from the data that I used, I didn't see a massive impact. And maybe that just comes down to that they're easy holes that if you're not taking advantage of them, then you are struggling and you're missing the cut. And that's kind of what my model showed. And then the real differentiating quality is how people performed on those other holes to kind of salvage their score on some of those difficult long par 3s or those difficult par 4s. Because there's a mix here from 450 plus yards where every single one of those par 4s is going to be challenging.
Fair enough. And I think that's a really good answer. You've shown your expertise, the best course down in the business, how to tackle the Copperhead course and the Snake Pit as well. One thing that I noted that was really interesting, the same thing that happened last year, they've grown out the rough again. It's 3.75 inches, extremely rough, and they've had a heap of rain this year in Florida as well. So not only is it going to be long, it is going to be thick, it is going to be juicy. So finding the fairways has been really key for me, and then the approach from 200 plus yards plays a really big factor in my predictions as well this week. You really are going to need to find the fairway, keep it in the short grass, and then those long irons are going to be disproportionately higher than compared to other PGA Tour venues as well. The other thing they did as well is they took the intermediate around the greens. It used to be 75 feet away from the greens on average. They've moved it right up to 21 feet. So that rough is just choking down on all those greens, which is why some of those approach metrics come into play. Touching on the weather very briefly, as I said, you just need to be in the Win Daily Premium Discord for all of the most up-to-date weather. There is absolutely going to be some volatile weather this week. It's going to be pretty wild. It's going to play a factor. I'll make a prediction as I did at the Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach, I said it'll be a 54-hole tournament, which was correct. This week, I think that they'll get all 4 rounds in because with Pebble, they were following it up with the Phoenix Open. It was a pretty big tournament. They knew the guys wanted to get there. Next week's tournament, the Houston Open, not necessarily the biggest event on the calendar, but I will predict that this will be a Monday finish. Friday in particular looks very bad. There's a lot of rain in the forecast. There's potential thunderstorms, and I do think that you'll get some delays on Friday as well as some very high winds, up to 40 mile per hour winds gusting as well, which may be impossible to play in basically. So at the moment on current forecast, I'm predicting that Thursday AM, Friday PM ends up being the wave that you want to be in. The reason being is that Friday, I think that you are going to get delays. You might not get the full round in, and Saturday weather does look better. So if you're going off on Friday afternoon, you're going to get to come out on Saturday morning, calmer conditions than everyone else is going to face on Friday, and you may avoid the worst of it. So that's where it is at currently from my perspective, but we use some of the best forecasting models in the business for weather. It's one of the sports, probably the only sport in the world that is the most affected by what's happening elsewhere in the universe, and we want to make sure that we want to get it right, especially for DFS. So make sure you're tuned into the Win Daily Sports Premium Discord below. And with that, I will hand back to quarterback Joel, who is back in the room, in a different room, it appears, with a more stable internet connection.
Apologies. Obviously, I am no stranger to losing my internet. We're not out of the woods for whatever reason tonight. I can't connect to my hotspot, so if I goes out again, I don't know how I'm going to get back on. So I apologize. I hope this stays more stable. But we got a draft tonight to break it down. A fun draft at that. Audience, I believe you guys had Scheffler last week, so we're going to put you back in the lead spot tonight for the draft. We're going to go audience, myself, David, and Spencer. You will go fourth tonight. Audience, you are on the clock with the first pick. As a refresher for how this works, you get a nomination in, so everyone can put in anyone they want. Once the golfer is doubled, meaning once a second person agrees with the nomination, that is your pick. It's a snake draft. It works just like any fantasy football draft that you do, meaning it'll go 1 through 4, then 4 back to 1. But you do have to stay within the DraftKings salary. So you can't just take all the best players. You do have to make sure that your roster can actually be played and you can afford each player that you draft. Audience, we have a few nominations coming in. It's a good start. I like some of these names that I'm seeing. And it looks like that first pick is in with JT, who I love this week. He's the guy that I would have considered with my first pick. I probably would have taken with the first pick there. So we're aligned on JT. We'll go to you, David. Are you eyeing JT at all this week?
Yeah, I had him in my my little practice draft here selected. I was hoping that he might get to me in third. Justin Thomas, obviously, is one of the best ball strikers in the world. I spoke about driving accuracy being really important here, but almost more important is your approach play. And Justin Thomas is obviously one of the best in the world in that. And we've just really seen his game turn around. The other aspect I really like with Justin Thomas this week is that his ownership isn't looking like dreadfully high. I would have thought it would be higher given he's the third most expensive on the board. And you've got guys like Xander Schauffele and Sam Burns higher. I'm seeing both of them sort of pushing 24, 25%. And particularly for Sam Burns, I guess that's surprising. That's really just based on his course history for me more than anything else. And I think that Justin Thomas saving a bit of salary there and a bit of ownership is a really savvy play. I mean, you're saving $500 compared to just Sam Burns, for example. So really like the play there. And for the audience, just a reminder as well, if you are drafting, that you need to be in the YouTube live chat. That's where we see all of your picks come in. So if you're following us on Twitter at the moment or Twitch or anything else where this is live streaming, make sure to jump over to the YouTube live chat, chuck the names in the chat there, and that's how we get to see them, and you get to help Team Audience build a lineup against us this week.
Yeah, it's a great call. This show works because the audience is the best audience around. Get involved, get in the mix, get in the draft, get on YouTube. You can comment, you can make the picks, and you can beat us, which you don't do often. But the audience does get their wins in there, so I think you guys are actually on a little bit of a hot streak more recently, doing really well. So excited to see how this team turns out here. I'm going to go with my first pick. I'm going to go with value, like I've been doing. I'm going to follow a theme that I've been following. I'm not going to start at the top. I'm going to find some value. Tonight's value is a guy I think I've drafted each of the last 2 weeks. It's in the 8K range, and it's Doug Gim. And he's another guy who, the way he's playing in this field, I would have thought he could have been in the 9K range. You know, the issue with Gim is that he's going to come with a bit of ownership. So you got to have to stomach that. But I'm okay with it here. I think he's the best value. His form is impeccable. I mean, each of his last 5 tournaments, he's got a top 15. He's got a top 10 within that mix. You know, he really has a really strong finish every time he's gone out since the end of January. So I don't see that stopping here. I think this is a good course fit for him. He really doesn't have a weakness in his game the way he's been playing over the last 2 months. And I think he gets you another top 20 finish for sure. So I love Gim. Excited that he led it to me here. Spence, I want to go to you. I want to see if you're on Gim at all this week or Justin Thomas.
I think ownership would be the only problem with Doug Gim. Models are going to love him. My model in particular loved him. There are probably routes that you could pivot away from him if you're in a lineup or a contest that needs to go a different direction. But look, I'm not going to talk anybody out of Doug Gim on the surface level of what I think he is. Like, he is an undervalued commodity in my model that let's see where the ownership actually comes into play. But it's not vastly different than any of these high-end names we're talking about. It's like, I don't see him at 35%. I have him at sub 20 right now. He's about 19%. So let's see where that number ends up closing when it's all said and done. But I mean, as of right now, he is not a player that I've removed from my player pool. I do think that there are a couple pivots, as I said, but I think Gim makes a lot of sense.
I'm with you. I think at 20, I'm happy and comfortable. If it does get to 30 or even 35, then I will reconsider because that's excessive. But at 20, I'm more than happy to take a swing on him there. David, you're up with your first pick here at 3. Would love your take on Doug Gim this week, and then you're on the clock.
Yeah, look, I love Doug Gim this week in betting markets. I think I can fairly say that he made my betting card this week because we got him at 50-1, which you won't find anywhere else anymore. I think that's probably the way I want to get my exposure to Doug Gim this week, just because his ownership is going to be really high. I know that Spence has him at 19. I have him a little over 20%. I do think that he can potentially get a bit of steam as well, because objectively he's too cheap, right? He's in great form. And of the courses that he's been playing lately, this is actually the best course fit for him. He's 8th in this field over the last 12 months for driving accuracy. He's in the top 20 for approach over 200 yards in the last 12 months. And those are both the key recipe for success here. And he's putting well. He's gained in all of his recent tournaments putting now suddenly. And at 8,400, he's just far too cheap. So I like him in that aspect. But I think that if I was getting exposure, it's going to be in the betting markets rather than in DFS personally, just because of the ownership and that comes with it. Doug Gim, very, very talented, though. I mean, came out of the class of Colin Morikawa and Victor Hovland. He was kind of like in the same conversation as those two guys. Obviously, his professional career hasn't panned out the same way as theirs has, but he looks like he's finally fulfilling the promise that he showed as an amateur through college. So for me, I'm going to go and grab some value as well. I would have actually taken Justin Thomas with my first pick here just because of the way I want to build this week, but I'm going to go and get some exposure further down the board to Adam Schenk at 7,100. Look, he looked a lot better last week at the Players' Championship. Much better performance, especially in the final round against Sam Burns, pulling through in the matchup for us as the underdog at plus 180. Finishing 19th at the Players' Championship is just no small feat, and he's got a great record here, finished second in 2023, and a course that's really correlated is another narrow tree-lined course with lots of long iron approaches is Muirfield Village, the host of the Memorial. He finished 7th there last year as well. Great performances. East Lake at the Tour Championship finished 9th, so there's lots to like about Adam Schenk, coming in much better form, second here last year, and I think he's a bargain at 7,100.
There you have it. Interesting theme. 2 more value picks in a row in the first round, which I like. We've certainly seen some Adam Schenk upside in the last 6 months or so. So it's a value play that I am behind. Spence, would love your take on Adam Schenk this week. And then you got 2.
Yeah, I agree with everything that David said. He had great upside numbers in my model. It's one of the positive climbers in that area. We don't have that many $7,000 golfers, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why even if you look at Doug Gim, I guess at 84 being underpriced, like there's this mad dash in everybody's mind to try to find the value in that range and get the player or two that they want. So I like the Adam Schenk pick. I think he makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go a completely different route. If you guys are going to, I don't know how we've gotten into this the last couple of weeks, but it's like, I think we're at like 6 consecutive shows where I've just been given the last pick here. So I'm going to fight my way through being stacked at the very end of this and try to make the most of it. And I am going to go chalk of all chalk. This is the chalkiest you will ever see me start a build, but I'm going to go with Xander at the top. I think that like when you build a model, and I understand this is going to come off the wrong way because Scottie Scheffler actually wins golf tournaments and Xander Schauffele does not. But when I'm looking at actual win equity percentages inside of my sheet, like Xander graded as if he was the Scottie Scheffler of this field. That doesn't mean that he necessarily gets across the finish line. I mean, if you recall, Scottie went on a little bit of a hiatus without winning himself, and then all of a sudden he goes back to back. So I just think Xander is the talent of this field. I think the form is immaculate right now. And when I look at the weighted strokes gain total or any of the weighted scoring that I had put together, he lapped the field for me. So I'm going to take who I believe is the best golfer in this tournament. And then I'm going to dip down and I'm going to go back in on Brian Harman again. Like, yes, it's 2 20% plus plays in a row. I am fine being able to differentiate my lineup by either leaving extra salary on the table with us going down to $5,000 or by just finding some value plays down beneath that are going to be like sub 1% owned. But I think Harman's skill set for this course checks all the boxes really that I was looking for. So Xander and Brian Harman for me to start.
There you have it. Those definitely are two of the better players in this field. Xander for sure. Harman looked really good last week. I agree he's a good course fit. I think it's a good start. It'll be interesting to see how you round out this squad with value as the draft goes on. David, you're on the clock with your second pick. Would love your take on Xander and Harman, and then where are you going after Shank?
Yeah, of the two, I'm probably more intrigued by Brian Harman this week. Xander Schauffele, obviously, I share concerns as Spence does that the win equity is maybe just not there. I mean, this guy hasn't won since July of 2022 and really probably should have won about 3 tournaments with the way that he plays. In the positive, he is excellent over 200 yards on approach. He's one of the best in the field in that metric. I guess some of my concern comes from the fact that he was right there at the Players. He had 2 putts that he should have made at least one of to get into the playoff. One of them was particularly short, and he again just stumbled at the finishing block. And I think it's a big tournament to be in contention with. It's an exhausting week, and not get the job done, I think, could be a bit emotionally distressing for him. Brian Harman, on the other hand, I think that very promising in terms of his driving accuracy metrics. The approach game obviously experienced a huge spike last week. We both liked him coming into the week, and he played very well as we kind of predicted. So of the two, that would probably be the route that I would go. Seeing how this draft has played out, and I didn't get Justin Thomas, I'm going to go and grab some more value before everybody else can. And I'm going to take Christian Bezuidenhout at 8,800. 13th last week at the Players' Championship. We really liked him entering the week as well. And I think that he more than performed admirably at this tournament, at that tournament there last week. In terms of this field, in terms of comp courses, he actually rates 16th for me in terms of strokes gained total on comp courses. And over the last 12 months, he's 7th on approach within this field as well. I think that's a really promising recipe for someone who's a really good putter, who's really accurate off the tee. He can grind it out. He's going to be able to scramble. He's going to make you putts. And I expect him to finish towards the pointy end of the field come Sunday.
There you have it. I love the pick. You know, he's definitely a value in most tournaments that we like. In this tournament, I wouldn't really call him a value. I mean, the price is up, but I think rightfully so. I think he's earned that price tag. He's playing really well. I think he's capable of going on and winning this tournament. So definitely a player I am behind this week. Spence, how about you? Will you be on Bezuidenhout at all this week?
I think Bezuidenhout is trending form. He's 8th in my model in expected proximity at this venue. It's really just going to come down, and I guess it would be a very similar answer in a lot of ways that I would say with Eric Cole right beneath him. How good is the driver going to be? Now, he has accuracy in my model, and I think that's a positive. When I've looked at him at some of these hard-to-hit fairways, he had a decline in my math the way I ran it. But, I mean, it's hard to argue against him even at this price tag. Like, yeah, I agree. He's a little bit more expensive than we generally expect him to be. But the form's immaculate. The safety numbers in my model really like him, and there's really no other way to shake it. Like, he's a top 20 player in all iterations of the math that I ran. So I don't have anything bad to say about him other than the off the tee stuff, which I think at a course like this can be mitigated a little bit if he's actually finding fairways. And if he does that, the ceiling is a lot larger for him maybe this week than at some tournaments.
There you have it. I love it. I'm going to explain my pick here real quick. I have my pick in mind. I like this player. I'm kind of stuck with him because of the way this draft went. And there's maybe a top 4 or 5 guys that you can get, and about 4 of them are gone. So if I want one of the top talents, I got to take him. Now, my team is going to start very chalky as I go with Sam Burns here. We're going to be very popular with Gimmon Burns. I like Burns. You know, I think he is going to be over-owned because of his history more than anything. But looking at this field, I mean, Burns is a top 5 talent in this field, conservatively, maybe better. So I definitely want to have some exposure to one of those guys up at the top. And with JT gone, Xander gone, Harman gone, kind of like my only option left. So, again, I like Burns. I think he can do well. I wouldn't really necessarily want to start always with this chalky, but I'm okay with it. I can get different elsewhere. So I'm going to make sure I lock in one of these top talented in Burns, and I'll find a way to make up for it later in the draft. Audience, you are on the clock. You got 2. I see the nominations already. Looks like the first pick's already in, so great job. Before we get to the audience pick, I'd love to get, Spence, your feedback on Burns.
I mean, Joel, you and I are having a chalk off right now. I don't know. I mean, I think there are some. I will say this about Sam Burns, and this might be counterintuitive for a lot of things that I've talked about with him this week. I think his outright betting number in a lot of ways is criminal where it opened. He is way too low. Like I almost prefer him. Like if I'm going to want to grab exposure, it's almost the opposite answer that David gave about Gim, because I do think Gim as a top 20 bet is kind of like a savvy way to go in that direction. Or I also have the outright ticket too that I grabbed on Monday. Like that might be like the better way to go there. I think Burns gives you the opposite mix where he might just actually be better with the course history that he's provided to play on DraftKings. And then in the outright market, if he beats you, he beats you.
Yeah, I like that logic. I think Matt makes sense. And this is the unique type of tournament where you can play games like that because, I feel like there's a smaller number of guys that I really have confidence in to win this tournament. So you can kind of play some outright games and then fading in DFS to kind of cover your exposure. The first pick for the audience is definitely in, and that is Straka. And I don't think the second pick is confirmed, but there's a few nominations. Oh, is it Nick Taylor? Yes, it's Nick Taylor. So you got Straka and Nick Taylor. I love this start for the audience here. I was considering Nick Taylor even at 9-1. I think he's overpriced at 9-1, but he's playing well. It's kind of one of those where it's like it's hard to look at Nick Taylor at 9-1, but in a bit of a watered down field and the way he's playing, it's probably justified price. And I'm okay with going there. I was thinking about doing it with my pick there. So I like that start. David, we'll go to you. Any interest in Straka or Taylor this week?
Well, I don't want to start Taylorgate, but I'm not sure if BD Fry meant Nick Taylor or Taylor Montgomery or Taylor Moore or Taylor Swift. I mean, one of them, at least in this field, is the Taylor that BD Fry meant. So, look, Nick Taylor for me is a no-go. I really liked him last week at the Players' Championship. The thing is for me is he's now priced up at 9,100. We got him at 175 to 1 last week, and now he's 35 to 1. And he played great the first 2 days, then absolutely lost his swing on the Saturday and just played dreadful after that. And the concern for me now is you get this huge uptick in his salary, and I'm seeing like 15% ownership even then going up to 9,100. So you're just spending all of the salary for someone that like his price is just shot through the roof, and he played great for 2 rounds and then didn't play great after that. So that would be my concern. The other note on Nick Taylor is he's much better with his wedges. He's very good under 150 yards on approach. That's why we put him up at TPC Sawgrass, because you do have a huge number of wedge shots on that golf course. This is the polar opposite. You've got 200 plus yards approach here, which isn't necessarily the strongest bit of Nick Taylor's game. I think Sepp Straka is a really interesting name in terms of the absolute upside that we know that you get with Sepp Straka. He's a real boom or bust play. I like him in large GPPs as a pick because the upside is absolutely there. He could easily go out and finish top 5 in this tournament. Again, just you are taking on a lot of chalk with that pick. I'm getting ownership numbers at like 13%, which for the 7K puts him as the highest owned within that range.
There you have it. Definitely ownership games to be played this week. Before I go to my pick, I'd love to hear from you, Spence, on the Nick Taylor and Sepp Straka picks from the audience.
I don't think it's quite the same spot we're talking about here with Sepp Straka at this tournament and Brian Harman last week. I talked about during last week's event at the Players how at the API, Brian Harman overachieved expectations on a course that I didn't necessarily love him for. The ball striking returns looked great. Kind of get the same answer here with Sepp Straka. He dominated tee to green last week, 8.4 strokes gained tee to green. I think from an upside large field GPP perspective, if you're swinging for the fence on him, that's great. I don't love the ownership that goes with it because normally when you want to take those swing for the fence plays, you don't want them to also be played by everybody else because you lose a lot of the leverage that you're trying to create in that spot. But I think Straka makes a lot of sense. Not going to talk anybody out of that. And I probably like Nick Taylor a little bit more than David does. arguably overpriced. I think that's a fair assessment. But even if you're directly comparing him with a lot of those upper $8,000 golfers, I mean, I probably pick him over most of those names. So to me, he's a fair price that you have to make a decision on, but I don't have anything negative to say.
Oh, I love it. There you have it. All right. With my next pick here, I'm going to go with another value play. A guy I draft a lot on the Draftcast, but he is in very good form at only 7,300. I really like Sam Ryder this week. He's got a T21 at the Classic, top 16, T16 at the Players. In terms of checking the boxes, I mean, this does seem to be a good course fit. He's pretty accurate with his driver. In terms of proximities, those long irons he's been excelling at. And he's been hot with that putter. We've seen him go on streaks where he's gone on multiple tournaments in a row where he's gained 4+ strokes putting. If he's able to do that again this week, I think Sam Ryder can get us another top 15 or 20, or maybe even top 10. So at 7,300, definitely a value. I would have played Ryder at $8K. So I'm happy to take the salary savings here and give me plenty of flexibility with my following picks. Spence, I'll go to you. Will you be playing Ryder at all this week?
It's tough for this show. It's kind of the discussion we have every single week where once one name is off the board, like for me, that would be Adam Schenk, that you can no longer take, then all of a sudden everything has to alter if you are trying to get down to certain ranges. Like I much prefer Adam Schenk when directly comparing the two of them. So I would rather just find myself overweight to Schenk in this spot. Ryder is a fringe top 50 guy in most iterations of how I ran my model. I think he's going to be very popular, like also at about 10+%. So I worry about the ownership a little bit at the end of the day, I guess, for a golfer that I don't have those upside metrics for. I don't know if David has a different opinion on that.
Yeah, so I quite like the Sam Ryder play just simply because I think he's your natural pivot spot away from Lucas Glover, who's going to be really high owned, and from Adam Schenk, who's going to be high owned as well. I see both of them pushing double digits, sort of in the 10.5 to 12% range for Schenk and Glover, and Sam Ryder at the moment I have 8.5% ownership, so a little bit lower. And I had a prediction pre this draft of how Joel's draft would go, and I had him picking both Doug Gim and Sam Ryder, and they're both there in the first three picks. So glad to see that my forecasting is going to plan, and the draft is playing out mostly to plan, other than the audience stealing Justin Thomas from me.
Yeah, I would say I am pretty predictable from that front. Generally about the 10 guys I'm typically drafting. David, got your pick on your stance on Ryder. You got 8,500 to spend, so a lot of money left. Schenk and Bizane out thus far. Who are you targeting here with your third pick?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna stick. I mean, as I said, this draft is playing out for the most part exactly as I planned, and I'm gonna stick in the value range with someone who I think is going under the radar a bit too much. A really nice pivot spot, and that's Andrew Putnam at 7,700. You've got a lot of ownership right there with Sepp Striker, Taylor Moore. You've got Brendan Todd and Lucas Glover below him also eating up a lot of ownership. But Andrew Putnam has just been striping it on approach the last two tournaments. He was gaining over 1.5 on approach at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Obviously pretty correlated in terms of a lot of long irons at that golf course, and then back that right up at the Players, gaining over 1.2 per round at the Players Championship last week on approach. Excellent correlated form. Finished 5th last year at the Memorial at Muirfield Village. He's got correlated form at the Travelers as well, where he's finished 13th before. And I just think that he's a better golfer than the ownership particularly gives him credit for. Really nice pivot spot, and he could be the guy who comes out in the 7K range and finishes top 10, top 15, and really makes your lineup a winning one.
I like that pick. He was the one that was on my radar as well. He will be in my player pool this week. I had seen recently his ball striking was up. I was playing him in showdown lineups in the last few tournaments. So at 7,700, I would call it a value play, especially in this tournament. So definitely a guy that I will be looking at as well. Spence, Will you be playing Andrew Putnam all this week? And then you got 2 more.
Yeah, I think it's nice value on Putnam with a lot of the trending metrics. I guess the one thing that comes into play with him is course history. And if we're not necessarily valuing course history here for all the reasons that I talked about, like, yes, you have those high-end returns of players going back-to-back, but there doesn't seem to be a bunch of corollary answers past that point. So a person who's in form right now that's trending in the right direction with Putnam, I think that's completely understandable trying to go in that route. So for me, I mean, here's the problem. Like, I'm too competitive at the end of the day because I really want to go Cameron Young and Carson Young because I just think it's funny to take both of them, even though, like, there's a very small difference between Cameron Young and Sung J Im at the end of the day, but I'm going to take Sung J Im. I'm going to take Carson Young. I think Cameron Young is still a good pick, though. It's just a very small difference I had between Sung J and Cameron. We'll talk about Cameron in a second, even though I didn't take him. But I think for him, the reason why I got pushed over the top is it has been a poor year for Sung Jae by all accounts of what we have seen. Like, you take away that 5th place at the Century, there's very little to be excited about. I think, though, that you have a spot here. He's averaged 4.8 strokes tee to green over the past 2 starts. That's a total that's eclipsed the negative 1.38 strokes that he's gained on average during the previous 5 times he teed it up. He was one of the big climbers for me when you put him on corollary comp courses for putting. So that's going to be these Bermuda surfaces that are dormant that get overseeded with this Poa Trivialis. I think you're going to have to make putts here, and Sung Jae has at least shown that ability inside of my model more than Cameron Young has. I think with Cameron Young, and maybe this is an answer where him with my next golfer makes a lot of sense because we have talked about it a lot on this show, and we've used these names over and over again, like Ludwig Oberg, Cameron Young, Cameron Davis, the player I'm going to take here in Davis Thompson. These are elite distance drivers of the ball, but they seem to actually play better when you put them in these club down spots. So, shocker for anybody who tunes into the show, one of my head-to-head bets this week was Davis Thompson over Webb Simpson. That's more of an argument against why I'm trying to take on Webb Simpson than anything else, because Davis Thompson doesn't necessarily have the safety profile that I want. Like, this is the epitome of what GPP large field only would be, because I do think there's a downside to Davis Thompson here, but some of the ball striking metrics, his approach game trending this year, there's a lot I like about his profile for a tournament that I think if he does put the pieces together, he has hidden top 10 equity in this tournament.
Boom. I love it. And I love the sneaky kind of value that you're getting where, you might get some lower ownership, might not be, it might be a little bit more of a sneaky play. But, Davis Thompson, we've seen it. Was it 2 tournaments ago or 3? He popped in. I think he had the low round of the day in round 3 and went really low. So he has that upside and that capability. The name crossed my mind. He wasn't in my player pool yet, but if you're on him, I might have to make some changes. David, you got your 4th pick here. Would love your take on Sung Jae and Davis Thompson, and who you going here with your 4th pick.
Also, guys, I have no money left. I think something's wrong.
Well, no, what's wrong was you drafted too many expensive guys.
I was very confused because I thought that Spencer had drafted Carson Young there at one point within that conversation. I thought that he'd taken Carson Young, Sung Jae, and Davis Thompson with 2 picks at the same time. So, Spencer, you've got 6,300 left on average. That's fine. There's a 5K range. We'll have to see how you work that one out at this point. So,
that's a good point, David. I'm pretty sure you did take Carson. I did hear you say.
I thought he did too, right? I mean, yeah. Just suddenly, I'm just going to take three picks with my 2 plays.
This is what happens when you put me at the end of the draft, and
exactly.
It's been a lot of weeks of back-to-back picks. If you try to slip in a 3rd one, sometimes you get away with it.
I know that your talking point, Spence. I knew you'd go straight to the fact you got given the last pick as an excuse there. Sung Jae Im, I think, is really interesting just because I think he is going to be a bit of a pivot. I see his ownership's pretty low. He's looked a little bit better the last couple of weeks. 18th at the Arnold Palmer, 31st at the Players' Championship, and he gained a ton of the strokes driving accuracy as well, gaining heaps on the field, finding fairways, which is really going to be quite important here. Good record at Muirfield, finished 10th here previously and 4th here back in 2019 on debut. So I think he's an interesting name. Davis Thompson, I have some concerns about the driving accuracy with him, although I will say that he ranks out very, very well for long iron approach. So an interesting selection there. Given how little Spence has here, where's everyone else? I think I can kind of play this however I want, and you guys won't be able to get to who I'm going to take. I'm going to go and take Tony Finau at 9,300. He ranks out really well for me in terms of a pivot option, lower owned than basically everyone, 9,100 and above. I think he's going to be tied with kind of Nick Taylor in terms of ownership, but everyone else is like pushing 18, 19, 20% above him. And Tony Finau in this field over the last 12 months is the best for strokes gained approach from over 200 yards. The most promising thing for me is that he's both long and accurate off the tee, but the putter has really started to improve. We saw him make some changes to his putting stroke at the Mexico Open. He gained strokes putting there, and then same last week at the Players' Championship, he again gained strokes on the field putting. I think that's really promising, really excellent at concourses at Muirfield Village. He's finished 8th, 11th, 13th there previously. At the Copperhead, he's finished 5th and hasn't played here since 2018. So obviously making a return to this golf course, I think it's really going to suit his game. And I think he's sneaky value at 9,300 for a golfer that really not that long ago we regarded as one of the top 10 players in the world. You're getting a huge discount on both price and ownership this week.
I agree. I think Tony Finau is a value this week. I think 9,300 is a little bit low for him. He is a upper echelon, upper tier golfer. I like that. I think it's an interesting selection. Spence, how about you? Will you be on Finau at all this week?
I think when you look at the ownership, like I see him at 13.5% right now. That number's kind of been trickling back and forth between 13.5 to 15% for me over the past 24 hours or so. It's going to come down to the putter, and it's going to come down to his ability to not go completely wayward off the tee. But the ball striking numbers at their core, there's a reason, like David's correct. There's a reason why this guy was universally thought of as, even if we want to say top 10 player or not a top 10 player, like as one of the premier ball strikers at a tee to green course that should find success. So I think as a pivot play in some of these larger field contests, it makes a lot of sense.
Boom. I love it. I love it. All right. With my fourth pick here, I have some solutions for the chalk, but we're not getting there yet. For now, I'm going to take Maverick McNealy. Maverick McNealy's been playing really good golf recently. A little chalky this week, but now I'm seeing about 13%, so I can stomach that. His scrambling around the green game is absolutely elite. Something that's going to be very valuable here. The driver has been pretty accurate. He's not the best approach player, but that's not his game. So, I think that will keep his ownership down. Like a lot of people who play DFS are just looking for guys who have the consistency on their approach play. You're not going to get that from McNealy, but his around the green game, his putting has been spectacular. I think that good form carries over this week. I think you get a really good finish for him at the low 8K range. I think that the value, I would have been happy with him in the mid to high 8K range. So McNealy's my pick. David, would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on McNealy? And before we get your answer, just a reminder, audience, you are on the clock, so feel free to start putting your nominations in now. And hopefully we'll be able to get one doubled by the time we're done talking about McNealy.
McNealy, for me, I think he possesses a lot of upside. I think he's an interesting boom or bust play. I think he's either going to withdraw or finish top 30, and there will be kind of no in between with him, which is kind of what you want in a large GPP contest. What I point out with Mav McNealy, which I found really interesting when considering his chances this week, is that last year when he was in this kind of stretch of golf, he withdrew at the Pebble Beach, he withdrew at the Phoenix Open. He finished 60th at the Players' Championship and then still managed to finish 36 here. So that was really interesting in terms of, I think that it's probably a course that does suit him quite well. Some concern driving accuracy, as you pointed out, but he has gained on the field for driving accuracy, both at the Cognizant and at the Players' Championship when finishing 9th last week. And In terms of the ownership, I don't think it's going to be too bad. You've got Adam Hadwin there, who's going to be really popular. Obviously, Doug Ginn's going to take up a lot of ownership, but then Seb Striker and Taylor Moore right below as well are both going to be high owned too. So he may be a sneaky pivot away from some of those names in large GPP contests.
I love it. I love it. All right, audience, you're doing a great job. It looks like at least one pick is in. I think we still need a second. But while we wait, Spence, will you be playing Maverick McNeely at all this week?
It concerns me a little bit that he gained 10.3 strokes with his short game at the Players. Like, that's an alarming amount that probably makes that finish a little bit more high end than it really should have been. Like, it's probably a miscut without that. But I do agree that when we're trying to find a way to pivot away from some of the chalk in this range, like, he either pops and continues what we've seen, or the wheels fall off at a course where maybe his irons end up hurting him a little bit. So I haven't made a decision one way or another yet if he's in my player pool or not, but I do think as a contrarian route, it makes some sense with it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Audience, great job and two great picks. Both guys I am considering was on this week, so I like both picks. You're getting Victor Perez and Novak. You know, Novak's interesting. He was obviously the darling. He was red hot, disappointed a bit last week. And that's the type of guy where people after one bad week tend to just kind of go away from. And I think, he could easily bounce back this week and find some of that form that he had. So he's definitely someone I will be looking at. Both guys under 7K, so two really solid value picks there as well. I'll go back to you, Spence. Will you be playing Perez or Novak at all this week?
I think they're both savvy picks. Like, I've been trying to figure out in this $6,000 section exactly where I want to go. Those were two names for me that were inside of the top 30 of my model in most ways that I ran it this week. So when we're talking about these, I mean, I'll consider them low-end names. I think more of the true low-end options probably become the $5,000 golfers now. Like, for me, this upper $6,000 range is really the formerly known mid $7,000 range. I think everybody just got pushed down a little bit further on the board, but I thought there were a lot of values in the $6,000 section. Those were two names for me that I am at least considering as of right now, but there's probably 10 plus names. And when I did the show with Byron yesterday over at Rotoballer, I think I legitimately rattled off 15 guys that I thought had intrigue in the $6,000 section. So the audience hit on two of them.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. I am following this up here with another guy in the 8K range. And I'm going to explain to you why I like Beau Hossler. I'm taking Beau Hossler here. We know he was on a hot streak this year. We talked about it a bunch on this show over the last, pretty much since January. I mean, he's given us a top 10, a top 20, two top 30s. And then last week he missed the cut. He lost 5 strokes on approach. And I think people are going to see that and be pretty disappointed. But if you take a closer look, the reality is he had 2 just terrible holes on the second day. Other than that, his numbers really weren't that bad. He actually gained strokes on approach in round 1, then got murdered in round 2 and missed the cut. So I think that might be overblown. I think he's still playing really good golf. At 8,300, I think you're getting a value for how well he's been playing this year. I think he could have been priced up in this market as well. Other than that, he should be a really good course fit, right? I think from the scrambling around the green perspective is one of his strengths. He's pretty accurate with his driver. I think if he finds some of those approach shots and those irons this week, he can have a really solid finish. Spence, how about you? Are you playing Beau Hossler at all this week?
We've talked about this a lot, Joel, this season. Obviously, it didn't work out last week at the Players, I guess because of the approach numbers that you talked about. But I do continue to believe that he's a golfer that goes under the radar in a lot of these contests. And the course history is never really during the stretch where you want it to be. But he's been overachieving those marks throughout the entire time of this season. And if we keep pointing back to this event of it not necessarily having the most predictive qualities to it, I think Hossler is a very enticing name to consider in this $8,000 section if you're trying to get a little bit different and away from the very natural points that are going to land you on Doug Gim or any of those other things. And I think for you, specifically with your build, I do think McNeely and Hossler kind of are a very natural move away from the chalk at the top there.
I love it. And that was a lot of my thought process was I can afford some chalk by now getting different down here with some of these guys in the late rounds. David, you got your 5th pick, about 8,500 to spend, a lot left. Would love your take on Beau Hossler this week, and then who you taking with your next pick.
I take the point that Bohos is probably a good pivot within that range. I'm seeing like 5% ownership. He's not going to be high owned. So in terms of GPPs, that's always going to be intriguing for a golfer that's had good approach performance and other than last week has been playing very well. My concern would come from he's had 4 goes at this golf tournament and he's had 5 goes, at this golf tournament. He's missed 4 cuts and he finished 39th. So he's never really performed all that well here. And so I guess that would be some of my concerns off a week where he lost a ton on approach at the players as well. So probably not for me, but I get what you're saying in terms of the GPP ownership aspect as well. I'm going to go and get some leverage myself. I'm going to stick again down the bottom of the board, and I think I've got to play a golfer down this end because otherwise Spencer's going to take him. So I'm going to take Alexander Bjork at 6,400. He's really intriguing to me. This is a really good course fit for him in terms of the driving accuracy. Finished 47th last start at the Cognizant Classic after missing a couple of cuts. He's obviously just moved over from the DP World Tour, finding his feet on the PGA Tour as well, and finished 11th pretty early on at the American Express, I think was a promising sign. In terms of like correlated courses on the DP World Tour, this is a golfer who's really accurate off the tee. He's a really good putter, which I think is going to be an absolute asset around this golf course, but he also gains a lot on long iron approaches, and I think that's what he's going to find this week. He was just putting top 10s together like every single week on the DP World Tour. I expect him to arrive at like a tree-lined, narrow golf course where he can use his driving accuracy to keep it in the short stuff, make a lot of putts, and use his long iron approach play to perhaps surprise some people at 6,400 with like next to zero ownership.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Getting us the European players as well. Super value. Spence, would love your take on Bjork, and you got 2 to round up the squad.
Yeah, great long iron numbers from Bjork. Fabulous accuracy totals. Like I said, there's a lot of players in the $6,000 section that are going to make some sense. So first of all, I guess 2-parter here. I did select 3 people the last go around, which makes me feel like I now need to take Carson Young based off of this. So you guys were not incorrect on that take there. I was meaning to take Sung Jae and Carson, and somehow it became Davis Thompson, which I like a lot, but that was going to be later on in the show when I was trying to project this. Worked out fine, didn't necessarily make a difference. I also kind of would just like to play Jordan Spieth and myself. Like that's probably like legal. I probably am worth 2,300 or whatever the leftover would be there, and that would be a nice little conclusion to this build after leaving myself no money. But I guess I'll go with Carson Young. There are intriguing upside numbers with him. There's a lot of things in my sheet that really increased his projections with the way that I was trying to run it. I don't love necessarily that the form that he's bringing in with the miscut and the 56 in the last 2 starts, but I think before that it was at least a cut maker to begin this year, and I think down in this range he has a lot of trending data that makes sense. I'm going to pair him, and there were 2 names at full disclosure here. I think Justin Lauer, Jacob Bridgman. If I afford either one of those 2, I'm going to take Lauer when diving into some of his weighted proximity numbers that I had. So 41st overall in expected proximity for Copperhead. He climbs all the way for 15th in this field from weighted proximity from 150 plus yards. We have seen him pop here and there over the past year. It's kind of the argument that I always make on this show when I put myself in this position. Like, you have to find a metric or a category that you can hold on to, because any of these golfers in the $6,000 section or $5,000 section are going to have obvious flaws. That's why they're priced down in this range. So I'm trying to find an area or 2 where I can find further upside that maybe some in the market are not trying or not able to locate. So I'll go Carson Young. I will go Justin Lauer.
There you have it. I'm usually a Carson Young guy. I think Carson Young provides a lot of upside. He's typically underpriced. I think both guys are 2 value plays that I would typically play. If you are dipping that low, those are the 2 guys I'd be looking at to go in that range. So I definitely like those 2 picks there. I think you rounded out your squad very nicely. David, would love your take on Young and Lauer, and then you got 1 pick to go.
Yeah, of those two, I probably prefer the Carson Young play. Carson Young is a little bit less owned than I thought that he might be. I thought he would actually attract a little bit more attention. Really good approach from his long irons, particularly. Finished 15th at the TPC River Highlands, the Travelers Championship, pretty correlated course to here. That was a signature event as well, so it was a really impressive performance, and he gains a heap with his driving accuracy. I do think as well, like around the green's been really predictive at Copperhead previously, but we saw a little bit last year, and I think it'll be the same this year, where because they've moved that intermediate in from 71 feet to 20 something feet, as I said at the top of the show, that kind of takes some of the skill out of your chipping performance, because you're not going to get these tighter lies. You're just going to find the ball in really thick rough, and you just got to hack it out, and it takes some of the skill and creativity around the greens out of the game there. But so I do kind of like that aspect for Carson Young. Justin Lau for me is probably a fade, just simply because his correlated form on courses is just really poor. He's never made a cut at the Copperhead course, at Muirfield Village, or TPC River Highlands. Those are all factored into my performance this week in terms of building my player pool. And the fact he's missed cuts at all of those, I guess, raises some concerns. I think he's pretty chalky. 4.5% might not sound a lot, but when you're in the 5K range, that's basically like the top of what you're going to find within the 5Ks in terms of ownership. And I would have thought Cheston Hadley is an interesting one. I'll just put that name out there. I think that he's worth considering within that range.
I love it. Is Cheston Hadley your pick here?
Absolutely not. I'm not going to leave like 4K on the table, Joel, as much as you might want me to. I'm going to take Jordan Spieth here. Again, thank you, audience, for stealing Justin Thomas from me. I'll call you out one more time. I would have liked to have taken him within my team this week, but I will very happily take Jordan Spieth. He's a past winner on this golf course back in 2015. He's won at TPC River Highlands, finished third here last year as well, finished fifth at Muirfield last year. He's looked in really good form other than missing the cut last week. Perhaps surprised a lot of people, but look, I think that he's one of the talents in this field, and I think in terms of the approach numbers, this week actually suits him a lot better than what we saw at the Players Championship. We've always seen him play really well on these like fiddly golf courses. RBC Heritage is another one that comes to mind. He's going to have the ability to find fairways. His long iron approach is excellent, and then his ability to scramble and putt can be some of the best in the world, and we've seen a lot of return to kind of the normal Jordan Spieth in the last sort of 3 to 4 months in that respect.
I love it. I love it. I think getting Jordan Spieth with your last pick certainly makes sense here. Spence, I know you mentioned Spieth pretty recently, so I assume he is in your player pool, but I'd love your take on that pick.
I like Jordan Spieth. I think that of all the players, and we'll include Brian Harman into this mix, I mean, this is going to be where you're able to at least separate yourself with ownership percentage from everybody else. Like Schauffele, Burns are going to, I think they're going to go higher than my numbers even have. Like, I think they're going to both be 25+%. I think Thomas might even start trending towards that 20+ range. Harman is obviously very close. Spieth I have at 15%. I wouldn't be shocked if we see this even a little bit lower than that. So I think he's a very nice play. We've seen what he has done at this course last year where, I mean, I think between Shank and himself, either one of those two guys, even though I got lucky on the Taylor Moore play, probably were a little bit more deserving down the stretch than Moore, and Moore just happened to keep his foot on the pedal and actually get across the finish line. But I like Jordan Spieth last week. It didn't work out. I think this is another spot, just like the Justin Thomas one, where it's a nice bounce back opportunity at a course where he should be able to play well.
All right. I love it. So for my last pick here, there was 3 guys that I was really zoned in on. Those 3 guys were Rio. So I know it's the thing. I draft the same guys every week. Joel Dahman and Victor Perez. Now, Victor Perez is gone. The audience set them a great job. So now it's down to 2. I really don't trust Joel Dahman. He played great last week. You know, he really hit the ball well. He's just not consistent. And, while the numbers probably look better than Rio's, and Rio missed 2 cuts in a row. I just think Rio's, if you dig and look at his numbers, he's playing pretty good golf. He doesn't really have too many blowups. I think this is a good course fit for him. I think he can get us a good result, and this is a weaker field, probably a better field for him to get a good result at 7K and the ownership, right? I mean, Joel's going to carry some pretty good ownership because of how we play this week. Rio will not. So I think he just makes more sense. I think Rio does have a bit of upside in this tournament. It's a bit of a gamble, but like I said, it's my last pick. Some of the other guys that I may have taken are gone. So I think Rio does have the ability to kind of be a difference maker in a chalky lineup in a GPP where he will be lower owned. Audience last pick is already in. Great job. Before we get to the audience last pick, Spence, will you be playing Rio at all this week?
I think the Joel Damon ownership, just to start there, is wild. Like it's way too much. I understand that you look and he gained 13 strokes tee to green, but I have no interest in that route. I agree with the Victor Perez answer. I was kind of hoping to round my lineup out with Perez and something potentially underneath from there. Maybe like, I don't know what I could have afforded, but I think Rio's fine. I think Rio makes a ton of sense. Like I think you and I, Joel, probably more so than 99% of people, and I might be generous to everybody else, are more Rio believers than the general public out there. My numbers always really like him. We've seen a little bit of a decline here recently, but I think this is a supremely talented golfer that at some point gets back on track.
Agreed. And I think when you're looking deeper at the numbers, like the numbers aren't bad. You missed the cut by a stroke or two here is different than guys who kind of blow up. And I think Rio's really close, which gives me some confidence that we'll see some better results in the near term. Audience, great job with your last pick. Aaron Rai, a guy I was considering, should be a good course fit. I like that pick there. David, would love your take on both Rio and the audience's last pick of Aaron Rai.
I do like that Joel started just calling him Rio with no attempt at all to pronounce the last name anymore at this point. Rio Hisatsune, fantastic golfer. Look, I've said before on the Draftcast, I'll say it again, that I suspect that he's going to become the Tom Kim of the DP World Tour and really burst onto the scene of the PGA Tour. The guy is just so talented, incredibly young. He's only 21 and a half. He's just a huge talent. And I agree. I think that he's really going to burst on the scene. The driving accuracy is very good for him. I think that's a real positive. We've seen him perform on similar courses on the DP World Tour in terms of where driving accuracy has been really an advantage as well. And the long iron proximities looks decent enough. So I think he's a really interesting name. I was sort of tying up between Alexander Bjork and Rio Hisatsune for my pick with my fifth selection there. So I think he's a great selection. Aaron Rai, I think, is going to create I think he's a decent enough pick. I'm just a little bit worried with the ownership. What I do like with him, the driving actually is very good. The approach game looks like it's really coming around again. He's extremely accurate off the tee. 24th at TPC River Highlands last year is obviously a positive in terms of correlated form. I just wonder a little bit in terms of the ownership. And with the wind, I think it's only natural you're going to miss greens here. He's going to have to make some putts, and that's going to be the question mark for me with Aaron Rai. He's not the greatest with the flat stick. If he can putt well this week, he's going to do very well, and that's really going to be the question of how he performs at the Valspar.
There you have it. That's a wrap for this week. I love it. I think we got some good lineups. I think it should be a competitive tournament this week. We're not done yet. As we pull the draft board down, hit the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. Follow along. If you haven't signed up for Win Daily yet, sign up now. As we mentioned earlier, it's one of our biggest promotions. You follow us for 1 week, you win. You pay for the year for the most part. And not only that, if you're really playing DFS seriously, you're going to want the additional information. Steven comes out with an ownership article on Wednesday night that will be one of the more accurate ownership articles in the business. Make sure you understand where these numbers are falling. We'll also give you weather updates, where the wind is lying, if there's a weather edge. I know David mentioned it already on the show, but things change. And so it'll be more accurate by Wednesday night, and we will post that in our Discord for you guys to get. There will also be outright bets and whatnot that we will post that you can follow along to. So make sure you sign up and follow along. Before we let you go tonight, we have our first round leaders. David, let's start with you. Who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
Yeah, spot on, Joel. We'll be dropping the latest weather updates right in the lead up to the tournament. It's going to be really important this week in terms of your PGA DFS lineups. it could be a huge weather edge developing if it ends up the way that it currently looks. So make sure you're tuned in, grab that promo in the description, get 50% off your memberships. It's the absolute best time to lock in. If you've ever thought about it, now's the time to get in, save yourself over $200, and make sure you're tuned in with us. At $250, it's just an absolute steal for all sports premium access and getting all the data metrics, all the proven winning bets that we put out every single week. So in terms of first round leaders, I've got 5 this week. I really like Tony Finau as the first round leader. You can get him at 45-1, so you're getting a massive boost compared to his outright win odds for the first round leader. He can absolute spike for one round. I think that's great value. Kristen Bezaden, how it's 60-1. Again, really hot putter. You're getting an inflated number compared to his win odds to spike for one round. Andrew Putnam at 75-1, Brendan Todd at 80-1. Again, a couple of accurate golfers who can putt the lights out. And we haven't mentioned on the show, so I'll throw out a bit of love for Zach Blair. Zach Blair, you can get 150-1 for first round leader. Really accurate driver of the golf ball. The approach numbers look really good. He's a great putter on his day. And I think that he's a potential sneaky first round leader at massive triple figure odds.
Boom. There you have it. I love it. Spence, how about you? Who are you looking at in the first round leader market this week?
So I don't have an official first round leader bet in yet. I'm trying to wait last minute to get everything finalized. I will say of 2 of the names that David talked about that are on my short list right now, Brendan Todd, Tony Finau, thought those were very intriguing numbers to consider. I am not the biggest weather person. Like I come on the show and say that a lot. I do think for this particular tournament, weather is a lot more impactful than a lot of weeks. So it's kind of just a wait and see game for me when it comes to exact DFS construction. And outside of where I found my best values on the board, like it's probably going to be more of an in-tournament betting card for me where I try to attack some of these matchups above anything else.
I love it. I love it. I got 3 on my first round leader card. The favorite, the first pick in the Draftcast. I like Justin Thomas. I think he comes out hot, a good start. You still get 30-1 for a guy as good as Justin Thomas. I think that's a really good number in this tournament. So I love Justin Thomas at 30-1. My 2 longer shots this week are going to be Sam Ryder, obviously a personal favorite of mine, guy I drafted. I think he can come out and have a hot first round, 75-1. And a guy that wasn't mentioned on the show, who I do like a bit for DFS as well, come low ownership, is Daniel Berger. Now, he's a risky play. You know, we don't know how he'll fare for 4 rounds. He might even withdraw. You know, we'll see. But we know he's very talented, and we know he's above the talent of his DFS price tag. And at 75-1, he's above the talent of what they're pricing him as a first-round leader. So if he finds something, if he plays that we know he's capable of playing, you know, this number is too big for what he's capable of. So this is the type of market where I think it's worth taking a shot on where you can get some upside from him. I will add that all 3 guys that I put out there are in the morning wave, and there might be an edge to getting those morning guys out there. They typically use a higher percentage of guys becoming your first-round leader that start off in the morning. That is a wrap for tonight. Another fun week ahead. We'll see what Showdown looks like this weekend because there will be a lot of attention on basketball, and DraftKings tends to water down their tournaments when they know there's another sport that they're competing with. So we'll see what that looks like. But it should be a fun week. I'm excited to see the finish, especially as we mentioned earlier. It's one of the most interesting closing back nines because there's some very difficult holes and anything can happen. Good luck this week. Am I forgetting anything else?
I mean, do we want to touch on the Merritt question? Anybody have intrigue on him this week?
Not me personally. I'm not a big Troy Merritt guy. I typically don't play him, so he's not going to be in my player pool, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
The concern for Merritt just always comes down to the putter, right? I think that the driving accuracy numbers are going to look really good. The worry is, can he putt? Can he gain strokes putting, which he's not done recently? If he was showing some signs of the putter, it might be a bit more interesting. And then the approach numbers are a little bit worrying as well. Tends to be very good with his wedges, not so good with his long irons. So that'd be my concern there. But kind of in the Daniel Berger frame of question, just flag that Aaron Wise is back. Obviously been missing for quite some time. Give him a first round leader at 190-1. If he was, healthy or in a better headspace, I think it'd be a lot shorter than that. So that's kind of an intriguing name to consider potentially if he's any way healthy, he would not be anywhere near 190 to 1. So, but Joel, I know that you have some personal contact with Daniel Berger and perhaps have some insight as to how his injury is developing.
I mean, not really. I don't, but
I'm
yeah.
trying to talk you up with your inside knowledge here, Joel. This is where you roll with it. Like, yeah, I've been chatting with all his family. I know exactly how he's playing.
I appreciate that. I don't know, to be honest, but no, my mom plays tennis at the club where his dad's the pro, so she does get a little bit insight from him. They have said that he's been back and playing well, but I don't think that's enough to be substantial. But listen, he has been playing, and he actually hasn't looked terrible, to be honest. And I think from what I saw, and I'm guessing, I don't know his actual medical record, but it seems to me like he's working his way back from rust from so long not playing, and less the injury being the concern, and more he's just got to get back into form of playing a lot of golf. So that's the type of guy that, especially a talent like his, that you want to target on the rise, because he should be able to get back there.
I agree with that, although some concern, I guess, if your inside knowledge comes from his dad, because parents are always just going to say how well their child's playing, no matter what they're doing. But It looks like Sia Nijad has one more thing, and I can only surmise that it's sport.